Weston, it's Alice and Mozilla at the West End. All of Weston's most interesting events, happenings, and people in 10-ish minutes or less between two pines.
Okay, let's start over. All right, grandkids, listen up. I'm going to start a series about your ancestors. Since you're out of school, you might consider this a history lesson. It's your own personal American history. In this introductory video, we're going to talk about 4 topics: genealogy, immigration, land, and the census. As you can see, genealogy is the study of our family history. Donda and I have been doing this study for more than 15 years. Donda's dad, Frank McDonald, had done a lot of research about their side of the family. He had gotten information from several relatives, and most of what he obtained was by studying actual records, even visiting places in Scotland and Ireland. Nobody in my immediate Schiller family was that interested, but my mom, your great-grandmother Mary Jane, had some relatives who were. And on my dad's side, his Aunt Harriet, the sister of his father, had done very extensive genealogic work in her later years, which she had passed on to our family. Genealogy is the study of generations. Let's go backwards, starting with you kids. You would be generation 1. Your moms and dads, generation 2. Donda and I, your grandparents, would be generation 3. Our parents, Philip Anthony Schiller and Mary Jane Ogden, and Frank McDonald and Dorothy Williams, your great-grandparents, would be generation 4. And for the moment, we'll follow back just the Schiller ancestry line. Philip Anthony's father was Anthony Clifford Schiller, and his mother, Lydia Elizabeth Boudreau. They would be generation 5. And your great-great-grandparents. Anthony's father, Michael, and his wife, Carrie Lifquist, now your 3 times great-grandparents, would be generation 6. And finally, Michael's father, John Peter Schiller, and his wife, Maria Doffing, would be generation 7. They would be your 4th great-grandparents. Both John Peter and Maria were immigrants from what today is Germany, but was called Prussia when they left home. Why do people immigrate? What makes them want to leave their homes for an uncertain life in a faraway land about which they know little? Well, they weren't completely unaware of what life was like in America. By the time of the middle 1800s, when our great-grandparents John Peter Schiller came from Prussia and Nils Lifquist from Sweden, there were even advertisements promising cheap land for sale. These advertisements were made by railroad companies who wanted to sell the large tracts of land they got from the government for cash to finance their western expansion. These maps were usually printed in their native language and thus were very enticing to the possible settlers. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how immigration actually happened. Before the Industrial Revolution...
Dad, be careful.
Right, I'll keep it short. Immigrants had to buy passage on a sailing ship. The voyage could be about 6 weeks long, was dangerous, and there were often deaths aboard. Once they arrived in America, they had to get further inland, also a long and difficult journey. Finally, having arrived, they had to find work, buy supplies, find some type of lodging for their families, and eventually try to obtain land to farm. All right, kids, It's time to talk about land and how important that is. It's so important that I wrote a 3-page paper all about land and how it's organized. And in fact, I think the best thing would be for me to just read the paper.
Dad, be careful.
Okay, get ready. On the Schiller side of our family tree, all our great-great-grandparents were immigrants, farmers, and landowners.
I think I've got about 10 minutes to talk to this afternoon.
Well, what do you know? What do you know? All I'm going to do is override this. So, that should be good. So, in summary, we have the states,
Is that the best you can do?
Sorry.
and each state has a number of counties, and each county is made up of townships, and each township, in a regular form, consists of 36 sections, 6 by 6, each one 1 mile square, so the township is 6 miles by 6 miles. Furthermore, a section was typically divided into 4 parts so that there were 4 quarters, each quarter being 160 acres, or the equivalent of a homestead. Periodically, companies made plat maps of the townships, and here's an example of Compton Township, at least a segment of it, in which John Peter Schiller here owns 277.5 acres in Section 9. Nils Lifquist, the father of Carrie Lifquist and the wife of Michael Schiller, has 80 acres here in Section 14. And finally, Michael Schiller has 160 acres adjacent to 160 acres of his brother Peter Schiller. Well, that's enough about land. Let's move on to the census. At first, the census only recorded the names of the head of the household and then gave a check mark for the number of people in the household in different age groups. It wasn't until the 1850 census that census takers recorded the names of all people in the household. All the census records from the federal government and many states, like Minnesota, are now digitized and available online. We can see a copy of the original documents. Here in Ancestry.com on my tree, P.J. Schiller, K.A. McDonald, is Michael Schiller.
Dad, stop.
Okay, but it is important that you know about how a census is done.
Do they count cats? Do they count dogs?
No, but I learned that a company is going to do a pet census so they can learn.
It's just the facts, Papa.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how to use a census.
That's enough, Dad.
That is enough.
On a long road, miles to go. It's winding and cold and it's covered with snow. But I ask you what we all want lines on my face, lines on my hands, lead to a future I don't